So what we're going to do today is go over a little bit of tissue work, maintenance my knees. I have squats coming up in a couple of hours here. And so my range of motion, I guess you could say, in my tib fib rotation. So if you're unaware, our knee has rotation to it. It's not just a flexion extension joint. So if we are limited in this motion, it's going to limit my hips. It's going to limit my foot potentially as well from pronation. That's more important for things like if we're running, our gait pattern, different things like that. But there's a systemic effect of things that happen all the way up. So I've already done some footwork. So now I just want to pull out any inflammation. I'm not going to do a super heavy cupping session here, but this is how I typically will work on myself. So I'm just using some Vaseline. If you guys have your own cupping sets and you want to do this for yourselves, always be careful cupping behind the knee. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to start with a small cup here, and I'm going to kind of move this around. It's very common for that to kind of pull off, especially if you have a lower body fat percentage. And I'm just going to start with trying to find, okay, what areas, like right through here, this feels a little more sensitive. I just want to see for myself what areas feel more sensitive as I'm pulling and dragging these cups around. So definitely right through here as well. Feels pretty tender. And I'm good up into the quads. So there's a lot of other work that can be done so that VMO feels pretty tender through there as well. But remember, our hamstrings can contribute greatly to that internal and external rotation of the tib fib, and they come down and insert below the knee, actually. So when we're servicing this tissue, we want to make sure that we are considering all those things as well. So I could spend some additional time rolling out my hamstrings, but all I'm going to do here, I might apply a little more Vaseline so that way these cups are a little more likely to stick. But I'm going to start placing these cups all around my knee here, and I'm picking up as much free surface area as I can, trying to figure out where these cups are actually going to stick, and hopefully you can see the color that either is or isn't coming up from the cups. So some of you have had this done before, and especially with me, and you know that this is not a pleasant feeling here. But the reason I'm sharing that is because people ask, oh, have you ever had this done before? Because it's really painful. Yes, I work myself, like I currently am, when I feel it's necessary. So that's usually on like a 10-week basis because I'm pretty good with my corrective exercise homework. But you can also see this cup right here, or I hope you can see that it's pulling up more color as I go down through the shin here, and not as much up through this area right around the knee. So I'm going to try to leave that cup right through there. And now, once I've covered as much area as I feel that I can, and with those cups that are actually going to stick, now I'm moving the leg here. So some of these might pop off, and that's fine. So this is pretty intense. If you haven't done this before, there's a lot of pressure coming behind these cups around the knee here. You can see how much color is being pulled up in these as well. And I'm just dragging back and forth, and now I'm going to start my knee car back and forth. So I do feel some tension right behind the knee here. So I am going to try to maybe get a slightly bigger cup right behind this area. Again, always be careful. Make sure that you're not actually sliding up right behind the knee. We do have some arteries and important things back there that could be dangerous. if you have too much pressure or suction on them. So sometimes you might even simply just need to hold the cup here. So I'm going to put a little more pressure into that, but this feels pretty good. And so I'm dragging back and forth. I'm starting to pull up more color, and this one I can see it the longer that I leave it. I'm still bending that leg back and forth here. And it's normal for some places to struggle with holding the pressure of the cups, but it's also necessary. So I would encourage trying to figure out how to leave more pressure on the cup while you're servicing that area. And now overall this feels pretty good. So now I'm going to move on to the other side here. I'm expecting things to feel a little different. Remember, our body tries to be symmetrical, but we're asymmetrical in nature, and things usually find a way of balancing out. So I'm going to load up with some Vaseline to make sure these cups glide and slide smoothly, and I'm going to do the exact same process here. So we might find some different stuff. So if you wanted to stick around, you can. You don't have to. There's a good chance a lot of the things that I do might end up being the same, but we might end up doing something slightly different based on what I find. I'm definitely getting some more inflammation and circulation in the lateral portion, kind of where my IT band comes down and inserts around the knee. So that could be, all of this stuff is communication, it's feedback. I just got done working with a client, and I was telling his mom that there's a lot of things I'm looking for in terms of cupping, with like inflammation, a lack of circulation, and then the circulation itself. It's all feedback. It's telling me what's going on with the tissue, and it's telling me, it's giving me an idea of different things I can continue. Ooh, that's pretty rough right there. I can continue to look into. So it might give me a better direction of, well, hey, this is pointing towards like there's not enough pronation happening in the foot. So let's take a look at the ankle mobility. Well, what does that mean for the internal rotation of the tibia? If we're not able to get proper pronation of the foot, then we might not be getting enough rotation from the tibia. What does that mean for the rest of the leg? That means that we're probably going to struggle with internal rotation as a whole from the hip. And then simply from there, we could do all the internal hip movements and stretches and mobility work that we want. We might see a minor improvement, but to get that lasting improvement, man, this is a good spot right here. Holy crap. To get that lasting mobility, we're going to need to ultimately address the ankle, foot, and tibial rotation. And that was the the client that had just came in, and I basically said, these are my suspicions. I think this stuff would end up working, pretty well. He also was presenting with a hip that was slightly shifted up a little higher. So if you've ever been told you have one leg longer than the other, there's a very slim chance that you actually have a longer bone. More than likely, you have one muscle or a handful of muscles, and it's not one muscle, that is tighter than the other. And if you pay attention to the way I speak, I rarely ever speak in terms of absolutes because it's science and things change. Like just a couple years ago, eggs were bad for us and now they're good for us, right? So things change. Take research with a grain of salt. Anyways, that's a tangent. All right, so I am pulling up a little bit of inflammation differently here. Now, this is a really good example right here at this point where I can feel that this is tender, but it's not showing any circulation. I don't know if you can see that, but that cup right here is pretty white compared to how red this guy looks. You can see how red that cup is. And when I take this one off, there's nothing, right? So what do we do there? Well, now I'm going to take my Graston tool and I'm going to scrape this area. So I'm going to bend with these other cups still on. So I'm going to make this tissue a little bit longer so that way I can get my Graston tool in here a little bit better. And this isn't the most comfortable thing to do, but we're breaking up some of that scar tissue, inflammation, whatever is holding back that circulation from getting there. You know, I can't really tell you 100% what it is, not even research can. There needs to be more done on it. There's a couple of different theories floating around there, but ultimately the end goal here is that we simply just want better circulation around the area that I'm cupping. All right, so we scrape, 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 scrape. Good. So now I'm going to go and place that cup back on there, and I'm going to leave it. Immediately, I can already tell that there's a difference in the color. Now, if it pulls up inflammation or not, generally when I do this, you're going to want to leave that cup on a little bit longer. But now I'm just going to take my leg through these ranges of motion, the same as the other side. All right, so I'm hitting my knee cars here. So I'm pulling into external rotation, and then I'm pulling into internal rotation. And if you pay attention when you're doing this stuff, notice my foot here, I'm kind of pulling up with the toe. If I try to invert that foot or flatten it out a little bit more, I actually get much better external rotation. I can feel that up here a little bit more. Now, if I come back this way and I pull in, and now I'm pulling really big from the top of my toe here, right? So if I try to evert that foot, see that movement, that's eversion, right? So I can actually get a little bit better internal rotation there. And that is also simply just pronation, what we discussed earlier, where the foot, if the foot can pronate better, the more internal rotation of the tibia we get, which means we'll get better overall internal rotation of the femur, which can help with a lot of different things. So short and sweet, this is how I kind of work myself a little bit. So we did end up pulling a little more circulation into this spot here, and now it's definitely not nearly as tender. It feels pretty good. I'll take these other cups off as well, and things feel much, much better around these knees. And now I'll do my ankle drills and my hip drills before I squat, and hopefully things feel pretty good. But we don't always need to service everything all at the same time, especially if you're doing stuff yourself. I think we have a tendency to think, if I don't have time for all of something that I wanted to do, then I don't have time for any of it. And I don't think that's a good mindset to have. We definitely want to take advantage of the small things. And honestly, oftentimes in mobility work and recovery or corrective exercise, we need to treat it more like we treat food. Most of us don't eat just once a day, and most of us probably don't eat like 3 days worth of food in one sitting and then nothing the next 2. It's because it's not the appropriate frequency. So this works the same. It's the same way we nourish our body with food. We need to nourish places frequently with movement and blood flow. So if we spend 90 minutes a day doing a whole series of things, but that's the only time we do it, we're not making as much progress as we could. And I'm willing to bet that you are going to plateau at some point, depending on how severe your issues are and how deep they run. So that is it for today. If you watched the whole thing, I appreciate it. I will be uploading more stuff like this, and that's it.